Welcome to Gay Like Me Conversations, where we discuss all things central to the Black LGBTQ community. You're going to laugh, maybe even cry a bit, and you'll definitely learn and grow.
I am Craig the Writer Stewart.
And I am Derek J.
It's time to start the show.
This conversation is making me a little anxious.
But why?
Well, two things. There are two things that I'm just really tired of talking about, especially in 2021. I'm tired of explaining to white people what racism looks like and how to identify it. And I'm sick and tired of explaining to black people what LGBTQIA plus means.
Well, we really can't be sick and tired of it because nobody really explained what LGBTQI plus means. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because the thing is this, I would say, I don't know. You know, when we were growing up, it was gay.
Yeah.
Then, you know, then it came to LGBTQ. Well, no, it was LGBT.
Right.
Then it came
LGBTQ plus.
Then IA. You know, so the thing is that nobody really never, we just kind of, people just started adding things to it, adding things to it without no real explanation. And I think that with Gay Like Me Conversations, we want to have these conversations surrounding these topics, but we never educated the people of what these things are.
Well, one of the things I would say is we, Black LGBTQ people, can't explain and educate people if we're in the closet, but that's a different conversation.
That is.
But I just feel like it's intellectually lazy of black people, or anybody for that matter, since our conversations are centered in the black community. I just think that it's intellectually lazy to not understand that sexuality is instinctive. That's how we're wired.
Right.
So if you're not on board with that, I don't really have the time for the conversation. I don't really have the energy for the conversation.
But with the acronym, I feel that, you know, we didn't create it anyway.
We didn't.
You know, so it's hard for us to try to, you know, force somebody to understand something that we didn't put ourselves into.
It's the white gays that's coming up with all these letters.
Yeah, and they added a new one, and we're about to find out about that today. Okay.
Good day, thinkers, thought leaders, progressives, and dreamers. I'm Craig the Writer Stewart.
I am Derek J, and welcome to an episode of Gay Like Me Conversations. And this episode is an episode for us to all understand what the hell we all talking about anyway.
Now, this idea was Derek.
Yeah.
Because I didn't say that I just feel like it's intellectually lazy for you guys not to do your own due diligence. But we're going to jump into this conversation, and we're calling it LGBTQ plus
IA.
Oh, LGBTQIA plus education.
And with that, we had to call up some help.
We did.
Because the thing is that we didn't know what the hell was going on. I mean, and don't get me wrong, we do know. Well, we'll let her help us talk about that. We have Jay. That's on here, and talk to me about Jay. What is
Jay is our subject matter expert today. She is a licensed clinical holistic therapist. I said that without looking at the card.
Yeah, you did. You did a good job.
Welcome, Jay.
Hey, you got it. You nailed it. It's a mouthful.
How are you today?
I'm doing really well. I'm so excited for this conversation. I'm just really happy you all are having this talk.
Oh, thank you. Now, how do you identify, Jay?
I identify as a queer cis woman.
Okay.
So that's so break.
Right, break those two queer
things down.
And cis.
So for me, I don't always identify with the title cis. I feel like it's depending on the company, depending on the conversation. For a conversation like this, where maybe I might be talking about the trans community or talking about non-binary folks, I do feel like it is just an element of consciousness to acknowledge whatever privileges might come around with being cis, whatever discrepancies, and to also identify that I'm not speaking on a community that I don't necessarily have lived experience in. But if I'm walking around in the world, am I just saying like, hey, I'm a cisgender woman? Not necessarily. It really depends on the purpose for me.
And what is a cisgender woman?
So cisgender essentially is just saying that I am identifying as the sex that I was assigned at birth.
Gotcha.
That's it. Yep. Whatever was assigned to me at birth, that's still what I identify as.
So I'm a woman. Well, I mean, like, yeah, okay. And then, well, no, but that's why we have this conversation.
Well, so Derek was assigned male at birth, but he lives his life as a woman.
To be quiet. and then can we speak to the queer part now? Why use the word queer?
And I love that question, Derek, because for most of my life, I identify as lesbian. And then as, I think it depends on the generation you grew up in, depending on the time. When I was younger, where you're from, region for sure. When I was younger, I didn't hear queer in an affirming way. It was definitely more of a derogatory term. As I got older, kind of lived my life, I actually have had a few partnerships and relationships with trans men. And for me, that felt more inclusive of my sexual orientation to then identify as queer, because that was more reflective of the fact that I wasn't only dating people who identify as women.
So we brought you on because we really wanted to break down the LGBTQIA plus, and then we'll talk about the new letter that we recently learned about. Okay. So I think that growing up, we knew L is lesbian, G is gay, B is bi, T is trans. So then, so I think that we're down.
Right.
For that.
And the Q is queer.
And the Q got later added.
Oh, yes.
It was LGBT.
Right.
So we know. So I think we're good with lesbian.
Right.
We good with gay. We good with. We understand. Not understand. We know it's bi.
He don't believe in bisexuality.
That's just my thing, but that's a different story.
I watched that episode.
You did?
And then we have trans.
Yeah.
So then now we get to the queer. And so the thing I guess for me, understanding. So is queer just is that just like a roundup of the LGBT of it all? So can a trans person be queer, or are they still trans? If that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things I wanted to anchor into this conversation was also people get to identify however they want to identify, right? And I think this whole spectrum of the alphabet soup that we know it as now with the plus and the additions, it's really reflective of how nuanced our identities are and how we're busting out of the binary, that it doesn't have to be either or. So if you're trans, you can be bi, you can be lesbian, you can be pan, whatever you want to be. And we also want to ground in that we are talking about gender identity and sexual orientation, not to convolute the two. And all of this is just kind of lumped up in this spectrum, this little rainbow that we see. But to answer your question, yes, I do think for all intents and purposes, queer is the major umbrella term that can kind of uphold everyone.
Now, can you offer the distinction between, you said gender identity and was it sexuality?
Yeah, so gender identity, we are talking about how you present to the world, how you identify. That's where we see more of the pronouns coming in. So if you notice, I have she, her pronouns. This is also a really solid way that we can be an ally within our own community. So if people are being misgendered, if they are being, not reflected as their identified pronouns, that can bring up a lot for people to constantly have to be correcting folks. And so if we're normalizing this conversation, hey, my name is Jay, I go by she, her pronouns, then someone who identifies as they, them, or maybe their pronouns aren't reflective of how we read them, just coming out the gate, that kind of lessens some of the anxiety that folks might feel. We're just kind of normalizing saying, I don't know how you identify based off of how you physically present. And that's more where we see the gender identity. That has a lot of nuances, and that's more where we're identifying pronouns. And I think even some of the non-binary and trans identities can be included in that.
Yeah.
Now, after the Q, we have I. And now, what is the I?
I know the answer to that. Now, the I is intersex, right?
Yes.
Now, for those who aren't familiar, intersex is what we used to call people that were born with both sexual organs. We used to call them hermaphrodites, but they're now called intersex. And really, for me, understanding that was really what helped me understand trans identity, because I just realized that if a person can be born with two organs, the opposite organs on the outside, then absolutely the DNA can be crossed, just for lack of a better word, on the inside. So that's how I've helped, come to understand it for myself.
Yeah, but we booked a subject matter expert for a reason. If we thought you knew all the answers, we wouldn't have her here.
Well, I mean, I knew the answer to that.
Oh, okay.
Well, go ahead, Jay. If you want to add to what I said.
Was that correct?
That was very well said. Very well said.
Hampton University.
Oh, Lord.
Yes. Okay. I see you. Yes. I love it. Yeah. And I think the only thing I would add to that, there's, when we speak of intersex, now again, we are going into a more expanded understanding of sexual minorities. And so when we think of intersex or asexuality or two-spirit individuals, yes, this is quite a wide spectrum, and everyone's experiences are very different. So I appreciate what you said, that kind of understanding intersex allows you to wrap your brain around trans identity a little bit more. And even those two identities are very different experiences, right? So when we see the purpose and some of the benefits of the identities, even though it can feel a little bit extra sometimes, like, why can't we all just be who we are? The needs, the resources, the medical responses are also very different. And when we see this with sexual minorities, and why it's important to have visibility and equality within these very nuanced categories.
And then now we go to the A. And
Asexual.
Can I ask questions?
I just said asexual.
I know, but you keep answering
like
the
y'all
questions.
didn't need me.
Go ahead, Jay.
That's what I'm saying. Well, no, I need you. Craig, Craig.
No, I do need
you. Craig wants to show his Hampton University education, like they had an LGBTQIA plus class.
It sounds like it.
Jay, listen.
Okay,
Sounds like
Craig,
it.
I don't understand how he walking around in heels and full makeup and don't know what some of these letters are.
Listen, you can assume.
Go ahead, Jay.
Thank you, Jay. So let's talk about asexual.
I appreciate it. And yes, you don't want to assume, but I am so glad to hear that there's already kind of a working understanding.
Yes.
You're right. And I think that assumption, that you just identified was, we feel like, well, wait, don't we all already know this? But there's a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of misinformation that's also floating around within our communities. And then also a little bit of resistance and sometimes judgment that are placed on some of the titles. So the A has expanded into asexuality as well as ally, depending on who you're talking to. Very separate things.
I did not know that.
You got it. Yeah, so the ally, sometimes people will include that in the A. But yep, asexuality, again, we would identify that more as like a sexual minority who can also have they can have a different gender identity. They can identify as lesbian, pan, bisexual, whatever the case may be. So I think that's the fascinating part about some of the letters is that they overlap, and one person can identify, let's say, with maybe 3 or 4 of the letters.
And then now, which is not a letter,
Right.
the plus. So was the plus added so that we can add more, or does the plus signify something?
From my understanding, and again, depending on, you can find, 20 different articles saying different things, depending on, like we said, region, who's writing the articles. I think y'all made a really great point that a lot of this stuff appears to have come from communities outside of Black folks.
White folks.
So yeah, we're going to maybe have a different relationship with some of this. So for me, the plus does represent expansion. It represents evolution, and just a reflection of how our language is reflective of our lived experiences here and now. Just, Black folks, we went from, colors, Negro, Afro-Americans, Black. We've had an evolution of our own identities. And I feel like we're kind of seeing the same here within the LGBTQ plus community, is that there's consistent nuances. With visibility comes reflection and identity as well. And I feel like eventually we're gonna end up with the whole alphabet.
Because I think it does speak to people just being more comfortable with who they are, which lends itself to adding additional letters.
And then they did, and speaking of adding an additional letter, they did add an additional letter, which I am on the fence about. And what is that letter they did add?
You're talking about the K?
Yes.
The K, yep.
And what does the K stand for?
The K is representing our folks in the kink and BDSM community. And so, again, now we're talking about a little more of sexual orientation, sexual minorities, just folks who aren't represented in. It's pretty much anybody who's counter mainstream, right? Anyone who is outside of whatever that mainstream conditioning is has been kind of, ushered into the spectrum.
Now, to me, that kind of feels like it's just focused on sex.
Yeah, so does that kind of negate what we're all trying to fight against?
Right, that we're more than just sex.
Is that we're more than just sex. It's like we have this whole spectrum of people that have, have a real, they have a real meaning and substance, and you get to this end, it's like, oh yeah, kink BDSM. Like, kink BDSM is more of a lifestyle than a space.
Then it is a sexual identity.
That is sexual identity. Am I
right or wrong about that?
I see what y'all are saying. I'm also, again, hearing parts of the conversation y'all had around the bisexuality piece. Like, is it more about sex or is it more about who you're attracted to? And remember, we're talking about sexual orientation and gender identity. And within sexual orientation, there is the element of that talks about attraction, and that can be mental, physical, different components to that. I agree. I don't necessarily include the K when I'm referencing the community, but I think what we have found is that there's a really big population of folks within the BDSM kink community that identifies queer. And so I think that might be where some of the representation and overlap has come from, because it's really kind of fluid in some of the spaces. And so I think that's maybe how that connection was joined up.
Okay. Well, Jay, I want to say thank you for taking the time out, because I know you carved some time out of your schedule for us today, and I really appreciate that. And thank you for breaking it down for us, because now that we have the breakdown, when we go into our next two guests, we have an understanding of what we're talking about and how we're going to go into it. And so I want to say thank you again, and I can't wait to have you back so we can dive more into our LGBTQIA.
Maybe you can explain to him that bisexuality does actually exist.
Well, that's another conversation. But
thank y'all so much. This is a great conversation.
Oh, no, I say thank you. So we have two amazing women that's going to come in that we have as guests, and I can't wait to really just dive in and talk to them.
I'm ready to talk to Bella.
Are we ready to talk to Bella?
Yes, I want to see Bella.
Hi, thank you guys for having me.
No, thank you for being here. Now, I know Bella from back in the day. Me and Bella have known each other for a very long time, and I knew Bella before Bella transitioned. And it was like we saw Brandon one day, and then Brandon went away, and then Bella came back, and I was like, well, wait, what? When did
when did all of this happen?
Now you think Brandon was good looking and Bella fine, so
right.
all of it. It all transitioned well.
Right.
But
Thank you.
So the question that I do have for you, Bella, is how did you know that you were trans? And before I ask that question, how do you identify?
I identify as a transgender woman.
And your pronouns.
She, her, and her.
Got you. Okay. Now, how did you know you were trans and just not gay?
So for me, I always knew that I had feelings for men. I always knew that I was attracted to men, but I never felt like I was a boy growing up. I always felt like I was a girl. And when I was in kindergarten, I started playing with, makeup and wearing my mom's clothes to school. Like, I would take my mom's shirts and I would tie them up and make them like a crop top. I wore my mom's makeup. And for me, that was just natural things that, I felt like made me feel good. but I was taught, to wear boys' clothes and things like that. But as I grew older, I found out what, being trans was. I met my first trans woman. I was 18 years old. I had just got out of high school, and I was very sheltered growing up. I wasn't really allowed to go to gay clubs.
Where are you from?
So I was born in Houston, Texas,
Okay.
but I was raised in Orlando, Florida.
Okay. And you met the trans woman, was it in Orlando or Houston?
Yeah,
Okay.
in Orlando, where I
Okay.
grew up.
Uh-huh.
So I went to this club called the Parliament House, and I was just like amazed by one of the entertainers there. I thought she was so beautiful. Her name was Dasha Sanchez, and I just saw myself in her. And yeah, she was the first trans person that I met, and we became actually really good friends. And I told her about me wanting to transition. No one else really knew about this, not even my family.
Mm-hmm.
And she supported me. She was just like, well, if you feel that's who you are, I support you. You just need to take your hormones and, go to counseling and all of that. She gave me very good advice. So when I actually did start transitioning, I wasn't transitioning more so on the outside. I was transitioning on the inside, meaning I was on HRT, hormone replacement therapy. I was going to counseling and everything, because my physical still was very masculine.
Mm-hmm.
Like Derek said, I was like a really attractive boy. So I was always really pretty, but I was still always found very attractive as a male.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that became a problem when I started dating before I transitioned, because I would meet, other guys, and they would, they'd be very attracted to who I was then. But as we would start to date, they just felt that I was very feminine and, almost like a woman at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had really bad luck with dating. Like, guys would be attracted to me physically, but when they get to know me, they felt like, inside I was a woman. And, of course, someone that is gay or is attracted to men is going to want to be with a man, whether they're,
Right.
Whatever.
Right.
So I just started to do my transitioning. I started to medically transition, and that was about 6 years ago in October. And like Derek just said, I had moved from Atlanta, and I moved to LA. I lived in LA a year, and that's when I started my transition medically. So when I came back to Atlanta, I was, full-time living as well at that point.
Now, how old were you when you decided to say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do? Like,
Yeah.
even when you started doing the hormones and doing the therapy, how old were you then?
25.
So how long was that after you had that conversation with Stasha? When you started taking the hormones, was it 3 months? Was it 6 months, a year?
When I had the conversation with her, I had started probably maybe 8 months after I had spoken to her.
So you had thought about it for some time. after
Yeah, I
that.
had thought about it. I mean, I was still in question. I didn't know if that was something that I really wanted to do, only because I was more so concerned about how my family would accept me as color.
So did it feel like a second coming out to you when you started transitioning physically? Like a second coming out for your family, your friends?
You know what? I feel like it was just, for my family, it was the death of, at that time, their son.
Yeah.
So I don't really necessarily want to say it was a second coming out, because when, before I transitioned, I never really came out per se to my, I never really said, I like men, I'm gay. No, it was nothing like that. My parents actually found out my sexual preference at that time when they had actually picked me up from sewing classes. I used to be a seamstress, so I was doing sewing lessons, and one Saturday my parents had picked me up from the lessons, and I got in the car, and my parents had my book bag in the center console, and there was a bunch of notes and everything, and they were like, "We need to talk to you about something. We want you to explain this."
There were no other little boys?
Well, what it was, this was probably, I was in middle school around this time, but what my parents had done is they had went through my book bag, and they had found notes through me and a particular person.
Got it.
We were, we were in a little, how do I say this? I don't know, we had something very interesting for a very long time. And it was something that really no one knew in middle school about, but just between us. It was something we would always pass notes to each other. We would always meet during lunch and have lunch privately. And, it was something that was very, very private between us. But when my parents found the notes, they were just really confused. Like, so what does this mean? Are you gay or what's going on with you? And all I could do was just cry. And I was just very depressed for so long because I knew that I liked boys, but I didn't really feel like I was a boy myself. Physically, I on the outside, and my appearance-wise, I looked like one, but I never felt like one on the inside. And for so many years, I struggled with that, only because I was so attractive as a guy. I was unsure if me transitioning would change, my life completely as far as, being accepted and, finding someone to marry and be happy with and all of that. So it was just more so for me transitioning how other people would perceive me, since I was already perceived really well before I transitioned. But when I transitioned, I decided to transition for myself, and it was a choice that I made, for myself. I had to put everything on the line and say, you know what, if I lose my family, my friends, it's worth it because I get to live comfortably in my own skin. I don't have to question myself. And, it was a really beautiful journey for me.
So once you transitioned, how did your family and friends receive you? Was it favorable or was it?
So when I first transitioned, my parents, they were not supportive. It was really hard for my dad for a couple years. My mom, she ended up coming around probably like in about a year. But really what I think helped my parents accept Bella and know who Bella was the relationship that I was in. I was in a 5-year relationship with my ex-boyfriend, and he was there through my entire transition, through gender confirming surgeries and, counseling sessions, like just everything. He was very supportive. And for my parents to see how supportive he was of me and how much that he loved me, it made them, realize like, this is my child. And, she's a beautiful person, despite, how she lives her life. But, now my parents are so supportive. Everybody, my aunts, uncles, they all, call me Bella. They use proper pronouns.
Okay.
Yes, I would say that I'm very blessed and I'm very lucky, and I'm in love again. So love has found me again.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, question for you. Even when you first transitioned to now, like you've done more to feminize yourself more, but you weren't. Even when you first transitioned, you were still noticeably a woman. So did you have any problems with misgendering in the beginning?
I did. I would say when I first transitioned, around the time before I got my breasts, very rarely I would be misgendered. But it has happened before. A few times, like when I was at the airport, when I would go through TSA, it happened, but it wasn't really too much like not interaction with like other men being misgendered because I had a boyfriend, so I wasn't really, going out and meeting guys. I was always with my boyfriend, so I never really had that experience as far as, being completely single during my transition and not really having someone there as like a protector, someone that, I can confide in. So yeah, when I first began my transition, I was misgendered, and, as every trans woman's journey, it's different. It's just like we are we start off as a cocoon and then we just evolve into a beautiful butterfly. So for me, I just, I knew it was going to be a transition. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I knew how I wanted to look and I knew what I wanted to do. So I felt like it was all worth it.
And we've seen a lot in the news in recent years with Dwayne Wade's son, who now has transitioned to live life as a girl. What age would you say, and I think this probably varies for every person, what age would you say is the proper age or a good age or a good time for a child to start transitioning? And I mean, by transitioning, I mean everything that you listed, the internal stuff with the hormones and then physically.
You know, I can't really answer that question per se because everyone's transition is different. I feel like a child knows who they are. Just like when I was in kindergarten, I knew I was attracted to boys. I knew that I was different. I knew that, you know, I like to play with Barbie dolls instead of toy trucks. You know, I knew that when I was in kindergarten. So I can't per se say when is the appropriate time, but what I can say is that parents listen to your children, you know, listen to what they're telling you and just be supportive of them because if you don't understand something or something about your child, just read about it, educate yourself. And I feel like when someone, especially being transgender, has a supportive family behind them, they make the right decisions and they just have an all-around smoother transition. So I wouldn't say that there's an actual age that's appropriate to transition. I just feel like it depends on that person, and who they are and how well they know themselves.
Now you decided to share your transitioning journey on YouTube. You know, so you showed some of your surgeries that you had, your procedures that you had. You would show that. What made you want to do that?
Just because I wanted to inspire other trans people like me, and I wanted to put the knowledge out there because that's how I found doctors, is through YouTube. I would just Google different surgeries I was interested in, and I would just watch what the YouTubers had to say about their surgeries, and it really helped me find the right doctors for me. So I wanted to do that to educate my community and just help them out because us as trans people, we are a small community within itself. So I feel like the more knowledge that we put out there to the world, you know, it can encourage other people and it can give knowledge to other people who may not have the same resources we have. So for instance, when I did my last surgery, which was January of 2020, I put it on YouTube and I received such good feedback. I still get to this day people, you know, asking me questions about my procedure that I had, the doctor, how my experience was, and everything. So
with your last surgery, is that something that you can share?
I'm sorry, what?
With the last surgery that you had, is that something that you can share with us? Like,
I don't mind. So my last surgery, I had my brow bone shaved, and I had a brow lift, and I had a hairline adjustment. So they pull the hairline down and make it more round and feminine. But yeah, they call that like a facial feminization surgery. So that's what I had in January.
Wow. Is there a thing, because I've heard stories of trans women that didn't have YouTube or didn't think to go look on YouTube, where they asked other trans women, and like you said, it's a very small community. Is there a thing where sometimes a trans woman who has really great surgery and looks amazing isn't always willing to share her resources in terms of where she went to have certain things?
That could be the case. I feel like some girls just don't want to share their knowledge with other girls, maybe because they might feel like it's some type of competition or something. But as for me, all of my doctors and all that information, it came through like close girlfriends who looked amazing, who I was like, oh my God, you look beautiful. What did you do? And then also YouTube. So I feel like, you know, we're all trans at the end of the day. We were all born, you know, we were all assigned, you know, male at birth. So we need a little bit of something here and there, you know? So I feel like it's just my duty to help out other girls like me.
Bella, I want to say thank you for taking time out to have a conversation with us. But if you can give some advice to young trans women and young boys that feel trans, what advice would you give them? Well, young boys or girls.
I would just say follow your heart, do your research, and above everything, love yourself first. Because when you love yourself, you can learn to love other people. And when people see that you love yourself, they can also learn to love you, despite how different you may be.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Bella.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We want to thank Bella for sharing her trans experience, but we do have Jasmine on the line with us too, and we want to hear her lesbian experience. You know, she's the L in the LGBTQ.
Right.
So, Jasmine.
Jasmine, you got to hold it down for the lesbians.
One good time for the one time.
Right. How you doing, darling?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the show. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How do you identify, and then what is your pronouns?
Well, I'm a lesbian, and I'm just she and her, you know?
All right.
So when did you know, Jasmine? How did you know that you were a lesbian?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I was very confused for a long time. I do have a homophobic mom, so I did what I knew I was supposed to. And I like I heard you earlier, and you were saying you don't believe in bisexual, and that's honestly what I identify.
That would be
as for a long
Derek that
period
doesn't
of
believe
time.
in that. I believe in
Yeah.
bisexuality.
So when I was younger, I'm like Bella, I found myself attracted to women. I would do the little stuff, you know, the humping or whatever, the fake little stuff. And when my siblings, they knew I liked women. If I was dating a guy at the time, they knew I liked women as well. I just didn't come out to my mom, because I'm like, oh, that would be you know, she would disown me and everything like that.
So Jasmine, tell us how your mom found out that you were gay.
Well, originally she got hints while we did a no hate photo shoot, because my siblings wanted to show their support with me. So my mom saw our picture and got really excited, and she just loved the picture, and she blew it up on a big canvas and put it up on her wall. And her friend came in and was like, "Oh, this is so nice. So who's gay?" And she was like, "None of my children is gay." It was like, just, you know,
Right.
you know? So then she figured, like, I figured when I feel comfortable with being in a relationship with a woman, I don't want her to not feel like I don't want this. So I always say, if I ever found someone that I'm connected with, then I'm going to cross that bridge where I'm going to tell my then homophobe mom that I am a lesbian, that I don't want to date guys. Mm-hmm. I genuinely felt like I was dating guys mainly because I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
Right.
So when I did tell her, she was taken back. That was the face. And she accepted me. She did start changing her ways, because before she did say little homophobic slurs like carpet muncher and stuff like that. And to her, it was nothing. But to me, I would hear some of the stuff like, "Oh,
yeah,
like, eek," like, you don't understand that it's really hurtful.
Right.
Or they would use, like how she was saying before, how they were saying queer as in a mean word. She was like, "Oh, look at this queer," or "he's this," or "she's that." So I was like, well, in my head, your daughter is the same way.
Right.
So it was never a comfort pocket I felt like I could go into to tell her until I got older, and then I moved to Orlando, and then I was just like, you know, I'm gonna live my life. And then she followed me. Then I was like, well, I'm not gonna start hiding myself because she's here. So then I just finally told her.
I've noticed that a lot of LGBTQ people move away to explore or live their true identity before they come out. It's almost like you have to kind of find that courage and, you know, and have some life experiences. But there was something else that you said that was really important. I think that it's important to mention that a lot of times our family members will use words like carpet muncher or sissy, fag, or punk, not really knowing sometimes that the person or the children that are listening to those conversations are internalizing those things, which also contribute to us staying in the closet longer. Because I remember being called a sissy, fag, and a punk by family members, friends from school, or in the neighborhood, and I was called those words by black people before anybody white ever called me a nigger.
Yes.
Now, wait,
and what's so crazy is our culture, they are the hardest to accept gays. They are so, especially our older generation, they're so stuck in their ways. So they don't really understand the new now. They see certain things and they just think it's automatically wrong because it's not what they were brought up on.
Right.
Now, we know, are lesbians in the closet too? Like, are there? Because we just know about gays being like, you hear about men being in the closet, but do we?
Yeah, there are undercover lesbians.
Okay, so
and I've had conversations with women who were married, but they were on the DL. Like when we think about DL, we always think about men.
Mm-hmm.
But no, there are women who are married to men, but they have these. What you want to say, Jasmine?
I was just agreeing, like that's me. I was engaged to a guy, and he knew that I was with him, and that's actually the reason why I left him, because I just wasn't happy. And he knew that. He knew I'd rather be with a woman, so he wasn't doing nothing for me, so we wasn't happy with each other in that relationship. But I definitely was on the down low. More so with my mom. My siblings knew, my friends knew, but the older generation, they had no idea that I like women until now.
And usually if your mom accepts you, usually you can move and move through life and not care about what other people think. It's usually your mom or whoever it is that raised you, whether it's your grandmother or whomever.
Now, how old are you now?
I'm 31.
And then how old were you when you decided to come out to your mom?
25.
Oh, so it's 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so now I know you said the relationship is better, but is it a typical mother-daughter relationship, or are y'all still working through things?
It's definitely now. When I was younger, I didn't have a relationship with my mom. I didn't have that mother-daughter, even though she did everything. I'm not going to discredit my mom in no type of way. She did everything in her power to make sure we was provided for, that we was cared for. She was always our biggest supporter. However, in that aspect, I never had that relationship with her to talk about any of those things. So now I'm able to open and be like, yeah, I have a new friend, and she this and she that, and she don't cringe. Sometimes I do see her, like I crack up to myself, but we watch a movie, and if it's a gay scene, she would just like look away, or she wouldn't head on watch it. So I try not to be as obvious, but I laugh because it's so funny that not funny, but I appreciate her still trying to, become comfortable with things, but you can still tell that she's still uncomfortable with certain things.
Yeah.
Now, because you know that she's uncomfortable, do you try not to have certain conversations with her?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Before I didn't. I was restricted, but I realized that it was hindering our relationship, and that I was still not being able to be open like how my siblings are, or I will just end up being in my own pocket, and I didn't want that.
Because the collateral damage of you not showing up and being your full self is you're shrinking. And I believe that every day that you're not living your truth, you die a bit.
And I was always so ashamed because like my siblings would bring their dates, and here I am in relationships, and I didn't want to bring her around because I'm like, how am I going to take her? But now it's nowhere near, like it's like 360. And I'm grateful that I didn't have that situation where my mom just disowned me or kicked me out. Well, I was grown then, but just it disowned me and didn't like, I hear other people talk, and they really have some bad experiences. And I'm so grateful that my mom, who was very homophobic, she didn't even realize how badly she was, but she came around, and now our relationships shows that we are closer now that we got older, and we jumped that hurdle.
What type of relationships are you interested in? Are you attracted to only women? Is there a particular type of women, or are you attracted to trans women?
Only women. Okay. I'm only dating women.
Okay.
Now, what advice would you give a younger girl that's coming out that is, struggling with being true to herself and understanding who she is? What kind of advice would you give her?
Well, first take the steps to learn how to love yourself, because I didn't love myself for a long period of time, and I thought I did, and I didn't realize I didn't. And I realized that I started pouring into myself and the wants that I wanted, and moving in for me versus moving for other people. Like I was saying before, I was in that relationship thinking that's what I was supposed to do versus doing what I genuinely wanted to do. So I had to figure out who I was as a woman and genuinely love myself, because I couldn't expect anyone to love me if I didn't love myself. So once I start loving myself, everything starts to flow
low, and I didn't care as much. I didn't care what people thought. I didn't care to like hide me, because I'm like, you either gonna accept me or you're not, and I don't care. So that's the biggest thing. Once you start pouring into yourself and start loving yourself, everything else will align.
I agree.
Jasmine, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and, you know, giving us a little light inside of your life.
Thank you.
No,
thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So see, the education, that's what we needed. You know, we need to understand what all these things meant, what, you know, and what effects that these letters have on people's lives.
Right.
So I want to say thank you to Jasmine, thank you to Bella, thank you to Jay for, you know, breaking it all down for us and, you know, letting us know what this is all about. Why are you laughing?
I was just trying to think if there was something I wanted to add to that.
You don't have nothing to say? You are speechless? I was able to close something out and be done?
I mean, you know,
Well,
everybody gets their turn to close the show out, right?
Well, end this off, sir.
Well, no, I think ultimately speaking.
No, end this off, sir.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Gay Like Me Conversation. I'm Craig the Redder Stewart.
I'm Derek J, and we will see you again.
Bye.
I had you shut up for a second.
Yeah, you did.
Oh.
I was still kind of thinking about what Jasmine was saying. Like she said, it's about living your life in a certain way so that other people coming along or coming behind you. I really do think that's what it's about, because I think about my journey, and if I was able to have some sort of playbook to follow, then I could have navigated even more of the pitfalls.
He's gonna find a way to bring it back to you.